Hello, listeners, and a wonderful welcome for a book review podcast today. And we have the bibliophile by the name Alok Kumar. He's a wonderful friend of mine. He's assistant professor in philosophy from Vrindavan University. And I was very curious to find out most of the times whenever I used to enter his room in his flat, I used to see a lot of books around him. And today I'm going to find out what books he will be talking about. Alok, please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Tushar. And
Good morning.
today I have five books that I've been recently going through and which I've enjoyed a lot. And these are the books that I want to discuss with you and I want to share it with our listeners. So
Uh-huh.
the first book that I'm going to talk about is a book by a person called Shiva Naipaul, and the name of the
Okay.
book is Journey to Nowhere. It's a travel book,
Mm-hmm.
and Shiva Naipaul, you would be familiar with the name of V.S. Naipaul, who was Nobel Prize winner in literature, very well known author.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
Shiva Naipaul was his younger brother who very tragically died at a very young age. And I have read both the brothers, V.S. Naipaul as well as Shiva Naipaul, and surprisingly, I find Shiva Naipaul to be far better writer than V.S. Naipaul, the Nobel Prize winner.
Okay.
And both of them have written so many travel books, but Shiva Naipaul's book, and this is the one which I'm going to talk about, Journey to Nowhere, is an amazingly good read. I have read V.S. Naipaul's travelogues to uh, other countries, but this one by Shiva Naipaul was written when Shiva was only 33 years old, and he was not a very well known name then, nor was V.S. Naipaul then. But
Okay.
come back to the book now. Journey to Nowhere is a travel book, and it's a travel to a country called it's called Guyana, British
Okay.
Guyana in South America, in Caribbean. It's part of the Caribbean islands. British Guyana is a very small country. Okay. Now, what happened is this book was written in 1978, and
All right.
there was a huge incident which took place there. What happened was an American preacher by the name of Jim Jim Crow.
All
Uh,
right.
he he had a huge organization in British Guyana. He was an American who had shifted from America to British Guyana, and he had a huge organization there. And in 1978, he committed mass suicide, and that
Mm-hmm.
was a huge news at that point of time. 900 of his followers,
Mm-hmm.
he along with 900 of his followers, drank poison and died in that little country. It was shocking news world over. This was 1978, mind you.
Right.
And Shiva Naipaul goes back to British Guyana
Mm-hmm.
to find about this episode, what exactly happened, and that makes it such a fascinating read. I mean, you can understand that it was a cult sort of. It was a cult to where this person, Jim Crow, who was uh, sort of the guru of that whole organization, he
Mm-hmm.
somehow had uh, convinced all his followers into believing that the world today is so uh, you know anti-religious. It is not possible for any human being to attain any sort of peace or happiness in this world, and somehow he was able to communicate or convince his followers there, because his organization was being pressurized by a lot of people in America, and which is why he had shifted from America to an obscure country, British Guyana, and there also he was being followed by FBI and other people, and finally he somehow convinced all his followers that our dream of a of creating a harmonious society is never going to fructify on this earth. And one day he asked all of them that today is the day we have to meet our Lord, and then all of them followed him. So, I mean, it's a shocking thing. How could so many people have done this? And that is what Shiva Naipaul uh, tries to find out in this book. And it's a fascinating read because he justifies this cult leader. I mean, and you are at the end of the book, you somehow feel sympathy for the person, this cult leader, who was able to uh, you know make hundreds of his followers kill themselves. In the end, you really feel that it's not simply a kind of a cult hypnotizer who has hypnotized his followers, and who is simply trying to be an egomaniac, and who is
You
so.
you um you agree to that person
Yeah,
of his
I mean,
deeds, or do you agree
you
with
know
the author in the way he's
exactly.
created this work, or do you agree to everything, both the leader and the author?
No, the author has done such an amazing job of putting both sides that you
Okay.
really find the real picture. Because when I've heard about this incident, I've known about it for a very long time, and
Hmm.
I've always felt like this guy, uh, Jim Crow or Stone, I forget what his name is. Um, so this guy, his name was, let me just, I'm forgetting his name. Jim Crow. What have I been
Jim
telling?
Jones.
Jim Jones was the name. Right, right. You're right.
Hmm.
Jim Jones.
Okay.
That's his
Hmm.
name. Jim Jones was the guy. Now, I've known about this incident for a very long time, and I've always felt like he is one of those, really evil sort of cult leaders uh, who are good at manipulating their followers, and somehow are able to get their um, heinous. So, my perception of this whole event was that he was an evil megalomaniac who was able to manipulate so many people into committing. So I had no sympathy for this guy. I mean, to
Hmm.
me, he symbolized complete evil. But when I go through this
Why do
book,
you say you agree to him?
yeah, that's what I'm saying, because Shiva Naipaul gives you the real background of what actually happened, and that is when you start feeling that there was a huge, background story to this whole event,
Hmm.
and you somehow feel that this is a lone guy who was trying to create a community of harmony, and somehow he was going against the government of that place, going against some ideologies of that time, and which is why he was disliked. Then he had to find a base outside America. What happens was this: you see, this is an era when Cold War was going on. Okay, so
Hmm.
America and Russia were two great big nations who had different ideologies. One was capitalistic, the other was communistic. Now, in
Hmm.
America, anyone who sympathized with the Russian communist movement, okay, would be looked down with suspicion and would be looked almost as a traitor. Now, Jim Jones was actually a preacher. He was a leader of a church, you know,
Hmm.
and he was a white guy, but his church had a lot of black followers, black people. Okay, now he wanted racial harmony. He saw that blacks were being discriminated against, and he wanted to create a community um, where you know blacks are given the rights and to live as they want, the dignity that they want, and the lack of discrimination. All that was his dream of starting a community. So he started very early in America, and he somehow started building this movement, and too many black people started joining, and the whites then became very started opposing him because they thought that he was kind of encouraging black extremism, he was encouraging black nationalism, he was trying to create further racial divide. But actually that
In
was not.
fact, this kind of act we can say is a racial integration.
Racial what?
Integration. We are trying to
Integration.
integrate
Yes, he was trying to
different.
integrate,
Right.
but the
Right.
point was he wanted to integrate it by trying to emulate communism. He wanted to
Mhm.
make a commune where everyone lived in a kind of a city where no one owned anything, everyone
Right.
worked. That's the communist state in Russia, where private property is not encouraged, where
In fact, he actually adopted several non-white children, and he called his household to be a rainbow family.
yes, he had many, and exactly, and the reason why this particular incident, this tragic accident took place was because
Hmm.
uh, he had a particular child, okay,
Okay.
through another woman
Okay.
who was not his wife.
Hmm.
Um, so now this child, his name was this child's mother. She was initially a follower of Jim Jones,
Okay.
but she later defected, and
Hmm.
she wanted the child. I don't remember the name of the child, but the name of the mother was Grace Stoen. Now, Grace
Okay.
Stoen was in America, and she had a child with Jim Jones when Jim Jones was still in America. Then Jim Jones started being uh, chased by the FBI and by the law enforcement in America on trumped up charges, like on charges of tax evasion, because he was sympathetic to communist ideas. So he was
Okay.
going against the American ideology. So the American government apparatus started kind of persecuting him. So he tried to
Okay.
find a place where his ideas would, some nation outside US, where he would be allowed to build his
Prosper with his ideas, right?
yes, his
Hmm.
community. And he found that in British Guyana, a very little underdeveloped third world country, they were a communist country, so they welcomed him, and
Right.
so he went there, and he took Grace Stone's child, who was his child as well,
Hmm.
to uh, British Guyana, Georgetown, okay, Jonestown.
Okay.
Georgetown is the capital of British Guyana, and then he created a new city called Jonestown,
Okay.
been keeping so many people under his command and control. And Grace Stone got the US Senate and very powerful senators um, to support her. So one of these senators started putting a lot of pressure on Jim Jones to either abandon his whole project or give back the child. Now Jim Jones was not ready to do either, so he was
Right.
put on a spot. So what happens was this, that then this senator flew from America on a plane with couple of people who were also armed. So
Hmm.
they came from that plane and they landed in Jonestown. And when Jim Jones knew that these people are coming, so he was now so cornered that he said, okay, it's a do or die battle now. So when he comes, um, so when the senator came, uh, he had asked his followers to stop them on the airstrip itself and not let them enter their community. What happened was, unfortunately, the scuffle got out of hand and the senator was killed. Now, the moment the senator is killed, Jim Jones now knows that the whole weight of the American government will be to will be after him. They will certainly get the child out from him, as well as they will shut down his community. Now that is what prompted him the next day. Now, so the day the senator was killed, the next day he says that this whole project is now over because we have crossed a point from which there is no coming back, because there's no way we can survive now. And that is how he convinced all his followers into committing that suicide. So it's a dream gone sour. That's how you look at it.
Right.
It's a person's dream, uh, which is a revolutionary dream, sort of. But it's an ideal. There's a lot of idealism in that dream, and all he wanted was to be left alone to pursue it, but they won't leave
Right.
him alone. So and situations took such a turn that he was, you know, he went into a corner and he had no option but to eliminate himself. And now, obviously, there is this whole fact about the Shiva Naipaul in his book describes that obviously when someone a leader asks his followers to give up their lives, it cannot happen so quickly. I mean, he had over the years conditioned them in such a way to make them so dependent on him that they would do whatever he said. And so to that extent he is culpable, no doubt about that. To that extent he is culpable, and no one is saying that he doesn't bear any responsibility for this huge disaster. But at the same time, Shiva Naipaul does an extremely amazing job of telling you that that's one side if you don't know the entire background history. So you feel both anger as well as sympathy for this guy. So that's the first book. I would recommend it to anyone. Shiva Naipaul's Journey to Nowhere.